the sea, she's a mystery that never ends. Some call her cruel, others call her a giver of life. But every sailor knows one truth. She demands respect. And in the old days, when wooden ships creaked across endless oceans, men found ways to give her that respect. They did it with song, with stories, and with 1,000 little rituals. Superstitions, some might say, that gave shape to the chaos of the waves. Life at sea was no gentle thing. The days were long, the work relentless, and danger was always close. Imagine it, the sun rising over an empty horizon, the ship groaning as the wind fills her sails, and every man on deck moving in rhythm. But that rhythm wasn't only from the creak of timber or the crash of waves. It came from the voices of the crew. Sea shanties, they were called. Work songs, yes, but more than that. They were spells of a kind. Tools that kept men together, gave them courage, and maybe, just maybe, kept misfortune at bay. You see, sailors have always lived in a world balanced on the edge of reason and myth. Out there on the wide ocean, far from land, strange things happen. Lights appear on the waves, birds circle in patterns that seem to mean something. A sudden calm might fall, or a storm might rise without warning. And when your life depends on the moods of the sea, well, you learn to pay attention to every sign, every sound. That's how omens are born. Take whistling, for instance. Harmless enough on land, but on a ship? Whistling was said to call the wind. A low whistle might bring a breeze when the sails hung slack. But too much whistling, too boldly done, and you might whistle up a storm. Old sailors would glare at a young deckhand who puckered his lips, and more than one man got a sharp cuff on the ear for letting a tune slip out at the wrong time. It wasn't that the men truly believed a whistle could stir the clouds, though some did. It was that out there, with everything balanced so finely, no one wanted to take the chance. And besides, the sea has a way of proving men wrong. Picture it, a clear day, calm seas, and a fellow starts to whistle a cheerful tune. Before long, clouds creep over the horizon. The wind stiffens. By nightfall, the ship is fighting for her life in the teeth of a gale. Coincidence? Perhaps. But tell that to a sailor clinging to the rigging with the rain in his eyes and the salt burning his throat. The sea listens, they'd say. Best to mind your tongue. Sea shanties, though, that was different. Those songs were welcomed. They were the heartbeat of the ship. There were hauling shanties for pulling ropes, capstan shanties for weighing anchor, and short, sharp songs for quick work. A shantyman would lead, calling out a line, and the crew would answer in unison. The work became lighter, the men became one voice, and in that unity there was power. Some even believed the songs could soothe the sea herself. If the voices were strong and steady, perhaps the waves would be too. And there were stories, always stories, to remind the men of what might happen if the songs failed, or if the omens were ignored. An albatross following the ship was a sign of good fortune, they said. Kill it, and disaster would surely follow. Storms, bad luck, even death. That belief was so strong it found its way into poems and tales that outlived the age of sail. The albatross was the spirit of a sailor, some claim, watching over his brothers still at sea. Other omens were less kind. A red sunset meant calm seas ahead, but a red sunrise was a warning. Rats deserting a ship in port meant she was doomed to sink on her next voyage. A bell ringing by itself in the dead of night, well, that meant death was close at hand. And more than a few captains could tell you of nights when the bell tolled with no man near it, and by dawn, someone was gone. But back to the songs. You have to understand, shanties weren't just about rhythm, they were about spirit. A long grinding task like hauling up the anchor might take hours. Without song, the men's strength would falter. With song, their steps were timed, their effort shared. The shantyman's voice carried more than notes. It carried hope. He might weave in jokes, teases, or lines about home, giving the men something to smile at in the bitter cold. And sometimes he'd slip in lines about luck, about keeping the wind steady or the sea calm, a kind of plea hidden in the melody. Superstition? Maybe. But when your life depends on canvas and rope, you learn to believe in what works. And singing worked. Even silence had its rules. The sea was a place of sound, the slap of water, the groan of wood, the call of gulls. But certain silences felt heavy, unnatural. A crew might fall quiet when a ship passed in the fog, her sails pale and tattered, no crew visible. A ghost ship, they'd whisper, the Flying Dutchman perhaps, sailing forever without rest. Men swore they'd seen her, a shadowy vessel glowing in the mist, and every sighting was taken as a dire omen. Best to keep your voice down then, lest the ghost crew hear. Of course, not every sailor believed in such things. There were hard-nosed men who scoffed at omens, who said a storm was just weather and a song was just noise. But even they held their tongue at times, mocked the sea too loudly, and she'd find a way to humble you. It was safer to go along, to sing when the shantyman sang, to keep silent when the albatross circled. And so across centuries, the traditions grew. Songs passed from ship to ship, port to port, changing shape but holding their power. Superstitions spread like shadows, some fading, some staying sharp. And always at the heart of it was the understanding that man is small and the sea is vast. To live upon her waves, you had to listen to the wind, to the water, to the voices of your shipmates, and maybe, just maybe, to the whispers of fate carried in a tune or a whistle. Now, when I tell you that songs kept men alive, I don't mean it in some fanciful way. No, I mean it plain and true. Picture a ship out in the middle of the Atlantic, sails billowing, ropes straining. Every task on that vessel was backbreaking, hauling sails, turning capstans, heaving lines as thick as your wrist. Do that in silence and men wear out quick. But add a shanty, one voice calling, the rest answering, and suddenly the work falls into step. Each pull lands together. Each lift carries the weight as one. The song binds them like rope binds wood, and the ship herself seems to respond. And the sea, she listens too. Or at least that's what many believed. There's an old notion that rhythm itself could tame the waves. A steady song might keep the ship steady, while a ragged tune could unsettle her. Men swore that if the shantyman lost his voice, if the crew lost their spirit, the sea would sense it, and the voyage would sour. So the singing became more than a tool. It was a kind of pact between man and ocean. But omens, those were never far from sailors' minds. They read the world like scripture, searching for signs in every gull's cry, every shift of the wind. Some signs brought comfort. A pod of dolphins racing the ball meant luck. St. Elmo's fire, that strange blue glow dancing on the masts, was taken as a blessing, a holy light guiding them through the storm. But other omens carried dread. A ship's cat meowing endlessly was a warning. A mirror breaking on board was disaster waiting. And then there were the dreams. Sailors place stock in dreams, you see. To dream of drowning foretold calm seas ahead. But to dream of a woman, that meant storms. Women, they thought, belonged to the sea, and the sea was jealous. It might sound foolish to landfolk, but remember, these were men who lived where death was always a wave away. They had no weather forecasts, no radios, no safety nets. Their world was wind and water, luck and labor. Superstitions weren't luxuries. They were anchors of belief. And in the long watches of the night, when the stars wheeled overhead and the dark pressed in on every side, those anchors mattered. Whistling now, let me tell you a tale about that. There was once a young sailor, eager and green, aboard a merchant vessel bound for the Indies. He had a habit of whistling cheerful tunes to pass the hours. The older hands warned him, told him plain, no whistling on deck, lest you bring the storm. But he laughed it off, thinking it just an old man's tale. Days passed, calm and fair, until one bright morning he whistled loud and long as he climbed the rigging. By noon, clouds rolled black, and by nightfall a gale tore at the ship with claws of wind. The men fought, the captain cursed, and the sea raged on. Come morning, the storm had passed, but the young whistler was gone. Washed overboard, some said. Others claimed the sea had taken her due. And ever after on that ship, not a man dared purse his lips again. Now, I won't tell you if the tale is true. Maybe it was a storm that would have come anyway. Maybe the lad was careless, lost to the waves like so many others. But the story carried, passed from port to port, ship to ship, until every sailor knew it. And once a story like that takes hold, well, it becomes as strong as any rope. There were other signs, too. Birds held special meaning. An albatross gliding in the wind was a sacred sight. Harm it, and misfortune would fall swift. But swallows, on the other hand, were spirits of sailors lost at sea, returning to guide their brethren. Kill a swallow, they said, and you doom yourself. Even land birds appearing far out to sea could stir unease. It meant land was near, or worse, that the ship had drifted off course. And then there was the matter of women aboard. Many a sailor believed it was bad luck to have a woman on the ship. She'd anger the sea, they said, bring storms down on the masts. Yet, in a twist of belief, a woman carved into the bow, the figurehead, was a protection. She was the spirit that guided the ship, eyes forever watching the horizon. Bare-breasted figureheads were thought to calm the waves, their beauty appeasing the restless ocean. Strange, isn't it? To ban a woman from the deck, yet place her image at the very front. But that's the way of superstition, full of contradictions, born from fear and awe. The shanties themselves sometimes carried whispers of these beliefs. A verse here, a line there, warning of omens or calling for luck. Men sang of distant harbors, of sweethearts waiting, of storms survived. And hidden in those words was the pulse of centuries, the wisdom of those who'd faced the sea and lived to tell. At night, when the work was done and the ship rocked gently, men still sang, not work songs then, but ballads, laments, songs of longing. A voice would rise into the dark, carrying across the deck, met by the hush of waves. Some believed those songs kept away spirits, kept the sea from claiming more souls. Silence, too much silence, was dangerous. Best to fill it with song, to remind the ocean that men were alive and strong aboard. Ghost ships, omens in their own right, stirred the deepest fears. The Flying Dutchman, cursed to sail forever, was the most dreaded. Sailors swore they'd seen her. Sails glowing in moonlight, crew silent as the grave. To meet her gaze was to invite disaster, a wreck or worse. Men would fall quiet, some would pray, others would not look at all. And whether she was real or just a trick of fog and fear, the Dutchmen sailed on in their minds, a warning that the sea remembers every debt. And debts were many, ships lost without trace, crews vanished in calm waters, lights seen dancing on the waves too far from any shore. These things bred omens, and omens bred belief. Perhaps the sea was alive, listening to every song and whistle, marking every misstep. Perhaps she demanded her rituals, her respect, her songs, and so the sailors gave them, for to do otherwise was to invite ruin. Now, I've heard it said that superstition is just ignorance. Maybe so, but I've also heard an old truth that belief itself has power. A song sung strong can lift a crew's spirits, give them strength when their arms would otherwise fail. A silence held in reverence can calm fear, remind men they're part of something larger. And when you're balanced between sky and sea, with nothing but wind and hope to carry you forward, belief can be the difference between survival and despair. So the shanties endured, the omens endured. And though the age of sail is past, those steel ships cross the oceans now with engines humming, echoes of those old beliefs remain. A sailor today might laugh at whistling, but deep down, when the sea grows restless, he'll remember. And maybe, just maybe, he'll hold his tongue. There's something about the rhythm of the sea that lingers in a man's bones even long after he's stepped ashore. The roll of the deck, the sway of the masts, the sound of men's voices rising in song, it all becomes part of you. I've seen men who could barely string two words together on land, yet at sea they'd sing like they were born for it, their voices steady against the wind. And those songs, they weren't just music, they were memory, they were prayer. Some songs told of safe passage, of winds blowing fair, of stars shining bright to guide them home. Others carried warnings. Never mock the storm, never tempt the deep. The verses carried the weight of countless voyages, of men lost and men returned. Each line was another thread in the fabric of life at sea, and the crew knew them all, from the youngest deckhand to the oldest tar. Now, sailors weren't all solemn and fearful, mind you. They laughed, they jested, they told tales to pass the time. But underneath the laughter was always that awareness. The sea could turn on you in a heartbeat. That's why omens mattered so much. They weren't idle fancy. They were ways of reading the world, of making sense of forces beyond control. A sudden stillness in the air, for example, when the wind dies, but the sea still heaves. Sailors called it a dead calm, and it was feared, not because of the quiet, but because of what usually followed. A storm often lurks after such stillness. Men would glance at each other, tighten the ropes, check the sails. Some would cross themselves, Others would mutter charms under their breath. Better to prepare than to be caught unready. And dreams. Yes, I spoke of them before, but they were powerful things. A sailor dreaming of fire at sea was said to bring misfortune. Dream of a pig, though, and you'd see land soon. Strange, isn't it? But to men who lived between water and sky, anything that offered a sign was precious. Even the smallest acts became rituals. Now, never turn a loaf of bread upside down, never point at the moon, never rename a ship, unless you held the proper ceremony. Every rule had a story, some tale of a voyage gone wrong when it was broken, and so the rules lived on, as real as the ropes in a sailor's hands. And through it all, there were the songs. Ah, the shanties. Imagine the sound. Voices rough and strong, rising together as the anchor creaks from the deep. A single man leading, his call met by the thunder of replies. The deck thrumming underfoot, the sails snapping overhead, and the ocean itself joining in. Waves beating time against the hull. It was work, yes, but it was also something greater. For in those songs, men found courage. They found rhythm in chaos, order in the wild. Some nights, when the work was done and the ship drifted steady, voices would rise again, softer this time. Songs of home, of loves left behind, of harbors waiting. Those were the songs that could bring tears to a hardened sailor's eyes, staring into the dark horizon. Some swore the sea herself listened, holding back her fury for a while to let the men remember. And what of the omens today? The old superstitions may have faded, but not entirely. Even now, in ports around the world, sailors still speak in half-jests about bad luck. They may not believe in it fully, but they respect it. No one whistles too loudly on a stormy night. No one mocks the albatross. For though science has given us charts and engines and radios, the sea remains what she always was. Vast, unknowable, alive in her own way. I've seen the waves rise like mountains, and I've seen them lie flat as glass. I've heard storms roar like cannon fire, and I've heard calms so deep you could catch the beat of your own heart, and through it all, I've carried the songs and the omens, for they are as much a part of the sea as salt and spray. So when you hear a shanty, even now on some distant recording or drifting from the lips of a singer on shore, remember, it's not just a song, it's a relic of survival, a spell cast in rhythm, a promise between man and ocean. And when you hear a sailor mutter about omens, smile if you must. But know this, such beliefs are born not from ignorance, but from respect. Respect for forces far greater than ourselves. And maybe that's the lesson the sea teaches best. She doesn't demand understanding. She demands humility. Songs and superstitions, omens and rituals, they were ways for sailors to bow their heads to her power and, in return, to ask for mercy. Sometimes she granted it. Sometimes she did not. But always, always, she listened. Now then, the hour grows late. My voice grows soft, like the tide easing against the shore. You've heard the tales, you've felt the rhythm, and perhaps you've caught the hush that comes when men listen for omens in the night. The songs have been sung, the work is done, and the ship drifts gentle once more. So I think I'll lay my head down now, A sailor needs his rest, and so do you. Let's not whistle, lest we stir the winds. Let's not call the storm. Instead, let's be still together and listen. Listen to the hush of the waves, the steady breath of the ocean, the lullaby that's carried sailors into sleep for centuries. I'm going to bed now. Let's you and I drift off together, listening to the waves, and let the sea keep watch for us tonight.